What's going on, guys? This is Rob, and we are back with DC KO! And we are picking up with Knightfight. Knightfight is phenomenal. Like, it is so incredible. Batman versus Batman. So, what this does is this initially picks up before the DC KO tournament, right? And Batman, just kind of going through Gotham, has this really, really cool moment, right? Where he says, Gotham, another night, another crime. This is what I trained for. My mission to protect the city I call home. But my body's age betrays me. The sound of my bones cracking is drowned out by the sirens. Gotham's lullaby. Professor Pig and the Circus of Strange are back, which is absolute nightmare fuel. Professor Pig, most of you guys know, like, transforms kids, but the Circus of Strange is really where he shows how sadistic he is. But Batman says, police chatter on the radio said they kidnapped a whole school bus full of kids, an audience for their twisted circus. I race as fast as I can to get there in time to save the hostages and take down Pig and his horrific followers. But I'm too late, because the whole thing is just engulfed in flames. And he says, I should have known, my sons, there was a time when I was alone in Gotham, but that was a lifetime ago. Now, my family patrols the streets with me. Watching them work, it's impossible not to see myself in each of them. The leader, Dick Grayson, right? He says, for a while, I thought Dick would replace me, but he's built a role in life of his own, leads countless heroes into bigger battles than I ever thought possible when I started. And he says, the rebel, Jason Todd, right, the survivor. I worry about Jason's penchant for violence, but then sometimes I envy him. He embraced his anger in a way that I never could, which I don't know is entirely an accurate statement, right? When Batman gets pissed off, he gets pissed off. So I think he embraces his anger just fine, if I'm being honest with you. But then he says the brains, right, the detective, Tim Drake. Tim is always thinking, always planning. And in fact, there are a lot of fans out there that argue that Tim Drake is more intelligent than Batman is. Now, I don't know how accurate that statement is. I wouldn't agree with it, but there are fans who would. And he says the heart. Damian started as a killer, but has grown to be a healer, which in all reality, Damian probably has the greatest transformation of any of the Robins in the history of Batman's mythos. Being raised by his mother, Talia al Ghul, to basically become an assassin, to kill anybody who commits a crime, so much so that when she drops Damian off on Batman's front door, that Bruce tries to teach him the opposite, and Damian just keeps on doing it, right? Like, he literally has to learn not to kill first and ask questions later. It's a phenomenal take on the character. But with these kids basically being rescued, or at least rescuing who they could, that Dick Grayson just says, Mr. Freeze has attacked Gotham Zoo. And Tim Drake's just like, again, right? And Jason's like, might as well keep this party going. And Damian just asks, are you coming? And Batman kind of looks on it all. And he says, some nights I watch them and I wonder, if they're here, does Gotham still need me? Now, of course, he joins them in the whole thing. But that's when you pick up with the DC KO tournament, the tournament that's designed to determine who it is that's going to wield the Heart of Apokolips, basically become the antithesis of Darkseid, the person who will fight Darkseid directly in order to basically save the entirety of the universe. And as we saw in the first issue, Batman died. Like, literally, he got stabbed through the chest. Now, what's going to be kind of cool about this is that it's seemingly going to hit on the idea that no one actually dies within the tournament. You guys will see what I'm talking about here in a second, because once he gets shot through the chest with a harpoon by the Joker, that he basically just, like, disappears and then reappears as a stone statue. And then you just see this ping in his chest, and Batman teleports away. It's a mother box, right? That's what the mother boxes do. That's how you always know that a person is teleporting with apocalyptic tech, is they ping, right? And then, like, they open a boom tube and they teleport you away. And that's what Batman says in, like, the most hand-wavy Batman logic ever. And I love that Joshua Williamson is just rolling with it like he's Batman. He can do whatever in the hell he wants to, right? Like, it just says, it worked. The Justice League was allowed to prepare, to bring tools, weapons to help us in the tournament. I secretly brought apocalyptic armor outfitted with a special boom tube that would teleport me back home if I became inactive for too long. That way, I wouldn't be out of the fight if I lost a round. So yeah, I mean, it's Batman logic, right? You know, I love it. I think it's amazing. But he kind of looks around, right? He says, this is not the Gotham I left behind. How long was I trapped? Did we win? And then turn Gotham into this. Because Gotham looks a lot more technologically advanced than it used to. And even the buildings are just designed differently. And so Batman just goes into his comms, right? Watchtower, this is Batman. I'm back in Gotham, report. And nobody responds, right? Mr. Terrific, do you read? And nobody responds. Only for him to be met by a whole bunch of Robins. And they refer to him as the Batman who fell, the OG. And it's just kind of like, what? Like, wait a minute, what? One of them even looks like Oliver Queen, right? Like, it looks like Green Arrow, right? And that's where he's just like, Robins, right? But none that I know. And so Batman's taken by surprise here. He's like, the Batman who fell. Like, what are you talking about? And they just open fire on him, right? Like, they're just like, take him down. Now, of course, these are non-lethal attacks, but one of them just says, I'm calling it in, right? This is Robin 52. We have an illegal Batman sighting. We need backup. And so in the midst of all of this, Bruce, who clearly knows what he's doing, just kind of analyzes this situation. And while he doesn't say that the Robins don't know what they're doing, he does say, yeah, these guys are not the sharpest tool in the shed, right? So he's like, they're well trained, but not by me. I recognize their style, the swarm pattern, the speed and aerodynamics of the attacks. They didn't sneak up on me. They have a flair for dramatics instead. And I suspect I know who taught them, just like I know that they're not trying to put me down. They're leading me somewhere, and I want answers. So I let them lead me there, right? So even in the midst of all of this, Batman still has the upper hand. And he says, I know the rooftops of Gotham better than anyone. I've run across them countless times. But something here is off, and I cannot figure out what yet. At least my suspicion of who trained them is correct. Because when they finally get Batman to where they want him to be, he turns around and there's another Batman. And he just says, I warned you, Bruce, if you returned, it would be war. And right off the bat, Batman tells us who he is. He's like, this is Dick Grayson. Because he asks him, he's like, Dick? And literally Dick Grayson is just like, so you remember me? Good, right? And Batman just asks, like, how long ago did we defeat Darkseid? Who won the tournament? And Dick Grayson has no clue what he's talking about. He's like, what are you talking about? You know what you did. Now, here's an important thing to understand here about what's happening throughout the entirety of the DCKO event, the crossover with the Absolute Universe and what Darkseid is doing. That yes, Darkseid created the Absolute Universe so he could basically marshal enough power for himself and then attack the main DC universe and basically change the time stream, which is what he's been doing. Like, he's been manipulating the entirety of time. And in fact, he started in the future and it's just working its way back to the past. What was going on with DCKO and what Time Trapper Doomsday and those guys did is they quite literally froze the present in time. So it's basically like water just crashing around a giant boulder. It doesn't cover the boulder, it just goes around it and basically keeps it safe, for lack of a better analogy here. But the point is, those effects are traveling through time. And so seemingly outside of the moment when the superheroes were yanked out, everything else has changed. So when Bruce Wayne disappeared from the tournament, right, literally teleported out with a boom tube and showed back up in Gotham City, the effects of Darkseid modifying time have already happened. So it's kind of nuts. Now, that's a theory here. We don't necessarily know for sure. But what Dick Grayson does is he tells Batman, you put yourself in a Lazarus pit. You had your own special brand of midlife crisis. Your body was giving up on you, but you refused to give up being Batman. I tried to help you, but you rejected me. You rejected all of us. We tried to stop you. And of course, Batman doesn't quite get to finish his statement because he says no, right? He's like, I was in a tournament to end Darkseid, to gain the power to defeat him and save us all. And that's where Dick Grayson is like, do you hear yourself right now, right? Like, the Lazarus pit drove you crazy. You're raving on about fighting in a tournament to beat Darkseid. Like, are you serious, right? And it's just like, you're going crazy just like Roz, Talia, Jason, and Selina. And at that point, Batman's just like, wait, Catwoman? But again, Dick Grayson just says, whatever Darkseid tournament you're talking about is all in your head. Let me show you what is real, what I made while you were gone. And honestly, what Dick Grayson's done here is amazing because he just says, the Bat Tower. You and I have overcome so much trauma. And I realized, why not help others in the same way? Let anyone who wanted to be a Robin be one. So I built a team with the Titans. I took the idea and leveled it up. We take in people from all over. I used the training that you gave me and shared it with the world. And he says, we created a support system that grew outside of Gotham in a way that you never could. Now, Robin Incorporated has Robins in every major city in the world, run by Babs, Cass, Duke, Stephanie Brown. Our numbers grow every day. The world is far from safe, but your mission continues. Now, it's phenomenal to know that Dick Grayson basically built his version of Batman Incorporated. For those of you guys who don't know what that is, Batman Incorporated was a phenomenal concept created by Grant Morrison, where basically Batman just kind of built a quote-unquote Bat team in all these different places across the world. He took the Batman mythos worldwide. It was an incredible concept, one of the best concepts that DC ever came up with for his character. Of course, it's not really a thing anymore, and it hasn't been for a few years, but the fact is, Dick Grayson has essentially done exactly that, but here's where he improved on it, because where Batman Incorporated was largely predicated on using individuals' talents and abilities and then placing them on teams with various individuals that could complement each other's talents and abilities, Dick Grayson went further. The technology of Cyborg, the training of Starfire, right? Beast Boy, Raven, and her knowledge of magic, all these things were combined together to create a team of Robins that could deal with a multitude of different threats and could actually receive training, or at the very least, some measure of protection against different kinds of threats that the Batman mythos would never face off against, or traditionally never face off against. So it's really dope. But again, right, Dick Grayson says, you were always too much of a control freak, Bruce. You didn't like to share, so I did what you could not. I trusted others, and this is why I kept saying to you that you could stop, you could retire, let your legacy continue with me. And that's where Bruce just says, this is not you, right? And of course, Dick Grayson's like, I mean, of course it's me, right? I mean, do you even hear yourself? And Batman's like, no, you don't understand what I'm saying. This is not what I wanted for you, right? I did not want you to continue the burden. I wanted you to have your own life. You created your own identity, and I wanted you to keep that, which is true. Right, for the longest time in DC Comics, Dick Grayson was Robin. He was the first Robin in the Batman mythos, but DC graduated him out, right? He became Nightwing, he joined the Titans, did his own thing. Fans never looked back. They loved him as Nightwing, and they never really wanted to see him go back as being Robin. And that's what Batman's referencing here. You carved out a path for yourself in the world, but Dick Grayson just says, that's a lie, right? You did not want us to take the burden from you because you refused to give up being Batman, because you know that without it, you are nothing. And Bruce literally tells him, he says, maybe that's true, but I have to ask, you've built all this, and yet you still have Robins. Would you let any of them become Batman? And Dick Grayson doesn't say anything. It's the question he cannot answer, because with that question, he knows Bruce is right. And Bruce tells him, this is not right, and I need to find out why. And so again, Dick Grayson puts the mask back on, and he says, I know that look, Bruce. Do not do it, right? You are not going to escape. Again, I'm giving you one last chance. Stand down. And Bruce just asks him, right, did you forget who trained you? And Dick Grayson is just like, I've beaten you before, old man. And he just says, I'll do it again. And the fight between the two is knock down, drag out. And it's amazing because we rarely ever see an instance where Nightwing fights Batman, because Dick Grayson is a believer, right? I mean, he's a believer in the mythos of Batman and the life of Bruce Wayne. He would never really go against Bruce, mostly because Bruce wouldn't give him a reason to. They are very, very father and son. I would say more so than Damian Wayne and Bruce Wayne. But the fact is, right, Dick Grayson was the first Robin. Dick Grayson is a prodigious fighter, and Dick Grayson battling Batman is incredible. And so that's why Batman says, right, I never want to fight my family, ever. Even now, I am in awe of him, how he moves. I always focus on fighting fast and hard. It takes thought behind every move, but he is fluid, graceful. Muscle memory makes his moves effortless. Dick Grayson was born for this. And so in the midst of all of this, right, Dick Grayson asks, right, are you out of breath yet, old man? And Batman just says, like, you asked me to stay down, but if you're really Dick Grayson, you know that is impossible. But here's the crazy thing, right? As you would expect, Bruce Wayne gets the upper hand on Dick Grayson. I love Dick Grayson to death, right? Like, the butt is undefeated. But the fact is, Dick Grayson is no Bruce Wayne. And so Dick Grayson overcomes him quite readily, and he just grabs him and he says, let's go, right? We're finding out what really happened to get me here. together. And when he goes to leave, Dick Grayson grabs his cloak and it's just like, nice try, Bruce. I only wear the cape out of tradition. Like, I learned to fight without it. And can't you just admit it, Bruce? I am a better Batman than you are. Because he literally lands this punch on Bruce, taking him from behind and cold cocks him. So technically speaking, Dick Grayson gets the upper hand on Bruce because Dick says, I trust people and I don't lead with fear. Here's the kicker, right? Anybody who's a fan of Batman is just gonna be like, no way, like Dick Grayson gets the upper hand on Bruce. Like, that's never going to happen. Which technically you're right? Bruce Wayne just says, I held back. I didn't want to hurt him. And so Dick Grayson continues on. He says, listen to me and really listen, or I will throw you in Arkham and lose the key. This is the end, Bruce. You are not Batman anymore. He says, you did it. Gotham doesn't need you. You can stop obsessing now. But Batman continues this monologue. He says, maybe Dick is right. My time is up, and I'm too blind to see that it's his turn. He did something that I couldn't do. But the mother box in my armor, though, it's still receiving a signal from the Heart of Apokolips. And so that's where Bruce is like, I think I know what's happening here, Dick Grayson, right? What happened with the tournament and what I have to do. And Dick Grayson just keeps saying, like, please, for you and for me, do not do this. Like, just stop. And Bruce just says, fight me, keep fighting me. And Dick Grayson is just like, haven't you done enough? And so Bruce Wayne asks him, right, the question that's kind of been lingering on everybody's mind up to this point. If you're Batman, where's Jason, Tim, and Damian? Where are your brothers? And that's where Dick Grayson drops a bombshell. And he's like, don't you remember? You let your fear of us replacing you drive you insane long before you went into the Lazarus pit. You said there can only be one Batman. There can only be you. They're not here, Bruce, because you killed them. With that being said, guys, we're going to bring this video to an end. I told you, man, Knightfight is amazing. It's so amazing. But hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, drop a like. Make sure you guys hit the subscribe button, and I will catch you all later. Peace.